Let me introduce the one and only Anita Holmes.
Thank you. By the way, you folks sitting here can't see it, but we have someone here who's a guest for the first time, and she's sitting in Ontario, and I don't mean Ontario that you get to when you go down the 15 freeway. I mean Ontario in Canada. Anyway, so later on, well, just for now, just everybody can wave for Tricia. Tricia is waving at us, yes. She's a friend of mine I invited, and it's great to have her here. After the Inkslinger article came out, talking about all the things that I do, and it was a partial list for all the things I do and I've done, I got asked, how do you find the time to do all those things? Well, fortunately, I don't do them all at once, and a lot of things I don't do anymore. But I will tell you my secret, ADHD. And yeah, I have the inattentive kind. So that's the kind when you sit quietly and your brain is in 47 different places. So sometimes it works really well, and sometimes not so much. But my poem, Waffles on My Mind, I'd like to share with you today. It's part of my Ars Poetica series, which is a series of poems about poetry and about being a poet. I sit down to write a poem, but I have waffles on my mind. Not toaster waffles, mind you, or made from a mix waffles, but rich, buttery, and made from scratch, sweet or savory. Scratch? Not chicken scratch of the barnyard persuasion, a mix of sunflower seeds and whole grains, like corn, barley, oats, wheat, milo, and millet, nor chicken scratch embroidery, laboriously stitched on gingham squares, called depression lace or broderie suisse, falling in and out of favor over decades. No, I have waffles on my mind, made from basic baking ingredients, whole wheat flour, oats, flaxseed, baking powder, freshly ground salt, and soy milk. Waffles drenched in maple syrup, crisp on the outside but tender on the inside. The first bite yielding a satisfying crunch of buttery sweetness. I sit down to write a poem, but I have waffles on my mind. I place the waffle maker upon a hot pad on the dining room table and plug it in. Measure the dry ingredients, mise en place, combine and add fresh-made soy milk. The light blinks on the waffle maker, and I ladle batter to cover all the little squares. Set the table, sit down, patiently watch the steam rise, and wait for the light. I cook waffles to feed myself and to connect with generations on this farm-to-table journey through life. I sit down to write poetry, to pour out my soul and feed my spirit, to connect with others, to connect with self, to remember, sometimes to forget, grounded in keyboard and screen, mouse and cursor, remembering the home keys, the touch typing, the rhythm of language. I sit down to write a poem, but I have waffles on my mind.
And they are delicious.
And we're all waiting for an invitation.
We'll have to work that out.
Yeah, we'll talk. We have quite a few people joining us this morning on Zoom, and one of the persons joining us is our first speaker for the day. Technology is absolutely fantastic. It does amazing things, and we are going to have Scott Johnson be our first speaker of the day. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm good, Mike, thanks.
So tell us where you are, Scott.
I am in Huntington Beach.
Yeah, Scott was telling me this morning, it would be too much of a drive. I don't think I could make it this morning. I said, well, you know, we have Zoom. Oh, there we go. All right, you are on the screen, sir. Take it away.
Okay, thanks, Mike. My name is Scott Johnson. And my author today is Raymond Chandler. I'll just jump right in here. It's someone in 1961. Someone told Frank McShane that if he wanted to get to know what Los Angeles was like, you should read Raymond Chandler. And I would agree, specifically for the time period of the 1930s through the 1950s. Raymond Thornton Chandler was born in July of 1888 in Chicago. His father was a Quaker, from a Quaker family in Philadelphia, and his mother was from Waterford, Ireland. Until he was 7, he and his parents grew up, they lived in Nebraska. But when he was 7, his parents divorced, and his mother left and took Raymond back to England. At age 12, Raymond entered Dulwich, which was one of the better public schools in England. It was a prep school that required students to study Latin, Greek, French, chemistry, physics, and had a headmaster with a passion for English literature. Dulwich provides the foundation for Chandler's ability to write. He not only read the Greek and Latin classics in their original language, he was also required to critique them in those same languages. He ended his education literate in 6 languages. And then he came back to California in like 1912 and knocked around for a while. Then when the First World War broke out, he joined the Canadian Expeditionary Force and ended up on the front lines in France fighting the Germans. So after the war, he came back to California again and secured a job, which eventually he got the position of vice president of an oil company in Signal Hill through most of the 1920s. But in the early 30s, he had issues with alcohol, and the economy went, tanked, and he got fired. So at this point, he was pretty desperate for work, and he definitely had the writing skills. So he thought, well, I'll try my hand at. There was a thing at the time they were called. It was called Pulp Fiction. It was these magazines basically printed on newsprint, kind of like comic books, but they had detective stories in them. And it was the beginning of what we now call film noir. And the literal definition of noir is French for black or dark. But the American film noir is, I'm sure, hopefully everybody knows or has seen Double Indemnity was probably one of the best early film noirs. Big Sleep. He had something to do with both of those. Anyway, he ended up writing quite a few articles or stories. And for one of them was called Dime Detective. The other one was called The Black Mask. I mean, they all had that darkness to them. But these stories, he wrote these for most of the 30s. And in 1939, he published his first book called The Big Sleep, first novel. It was followed by a string of novels all through the 40s and early 50s, and the last complete novel he had was Farewell, My Loved One. Okay, and during this time, he also wrote a series of articles for the Atlantic Monthly. and simultaneously he got a job writing screenplays with Paramount, and he wrote a series of articles for Atlantic Monthly about pretty much his criticism of the film industry, which didn't always go over well. He had no problem holding back how he really felt. So anyway, he wrote the screenplay with Billy Wilder for Double Indemnity. In fact, he is even in that movie. There's a scene where Fred McMurray comes out of his office, and there's a guy sitting outside the office, and that guy is Raymond Chandler, kind of like an Alfred Hitchcock cameo. So anyway, he became a prolific. He was also a prolific letter writer, and he had relationships with exchanging letters with almost a who's who of writers at the time. James M. Cain, Dashiell Hammett, Alfred Hitchcock, Ian Fleming, Somerset Maugham, Earl Stanley Gardner. There's a long list of almost thousands of letters that he wrote to other writers. And in 1988, Time magazine on his 100th birthday said this: Raymond Chandler was the ghostwriter to the soundtrack of our lives that our lives so often imitate. Chandler has inspired more poses and parodies than any other American writer of the century, save Hemingway. And Barry Date was an editor of a book about his writings. There's several books related to his writings. And in the dedication to that book, he says, this is...
Okay. So our presentation is called The California Novels of John Steinbeck. Get it? This is the California writers and the California novels. Uh-oh. Not working. It's happened last time.
Pushing the right
It worked the first time.
Huh. Huh.
I told you to buckle your seatbelts.
There it goes.
Why don't you do it?
I'll do it. Out of the van.
Okay. This is a cooperation between the two mics. John Steinbeck was born in Salinas, California in 1902. He studied English at Stanford University, and his first novel was Cup of Gold, which was about Henry Morgan, the pirate. If any of you are history buffs, you might know who he is. And so Steinbeck was ended up being one of the most successful American writers. So, like I said, in this presentation, he's had several California novels, or the California series, or also called the Dust Bowl series. Next slide, or next panel, whatever. Tortilla Flat. I always call it Tortilla Flat, and I get hungry. That was published in 1935. It was Steinbeck's first successful novel. The main character is Danny. The plot is about Danny inherits 2 houses, and he shares them with his jobless friends who like to sit around and talk and drink wine. It takes place after World War I and before Prohibition, obviously. And the themes are friendship, loyalty, and rejection of materialism, especially since they're jobless and kind of easy to do. And it was filmed in 1942. I saw that film. Starred Spencer Tracy and John Garfield. I didn't care for it. It kind of fell flat. Next slide. of Mice and Men was published in 1937. It's actually a novella. It was written kind of like as a stage play in mind. The main character is George Milton. There goes my voice. The plot is about two struggling migrant workers who dream of owning their own ranch. Of course, it's during the Depression. The themes, aspirations, well, of independence and having some self-respect, feelings of loneliness and powerlessness, dealing with oppression, poverty, and abuse. Next. Okay, interesting enough, the title of Mice and Men is inspired by Robert Burns' poem, To a Mouse. The best, this might be familiar, the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. The truth is that he was tilling up his soil on his property and ran over a nest of mice. He felt so bad, he wrote the poem. Yes, next again. Okay, so Mice and Men was filmed, to my count, 4 times at least. My favorite version, the most famous version in 1937, one starred Burgess Meredith as George Milton and Lon Chaney Jr. as Lenny. I think he was named Lenny Small. He's a big guy. And the movie received several Academy Award nominations. Next. I'm sure I'm forgetting some information here. It was banned all over the place, not just states in this country, especially the Deep South, but in other countries as well. It was banned for euphemism, condoning racial slurs, being anti-business. Oh my. And for using profanity, racial slurs. It's one of the most banned books ever. Next. Thanks, Mike. The Grapes of Wrath, published in April of 1939. Critics consider this as a masterpiece, Steinbeck's masterpiece. The main character is Tom Joad. The plot is, well, it's about the Joad family. They're driven out of Oklahoma by a horrible drought and a bank foreclosure. And they travel in a terrible, broken down jalopy all the way from Oklahoma to California, alongside of thousands of people out of work and looking for a better life. Takes place, of course, during the Great Depression. Next slide. Out of breath. The Grapes of Wrath title was inspired by the Battle Hymn of the Republic. I am not going to sing this, okay? You don't want to, I'm not going to put you through that misery. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where grapes of wrath are stored. These lyrics were inspired by the Bible passage, Revelations 14, 19 through 20. Anybody familiar with that? Oh, yeah, oh, okay. Next one, next slide, next panel.
Coming.
The Grapes of Wrath was highly cited when Steinbeck won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1962. It also won the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award, and is ranked 7th in Le Monde's 100 Books of the Century. That ain't bad, folks. Number 7. Next. Wait a second. Henry Rowe was published in 1945. It's a more or less a whimsical comedy. The main character is Doc, and it's about his relationship with a fellow friend named Mac, and various unemployed, rather dubious men. And the theme there is friendship and loyalty, no matter what the cost. It was filmed in 1982 and starred Nick Nolte. I remember going to movies and seeing that one. There's a cool picture here. Oops,
I'll
is
get
that
back.
the street that was in Monterey was renamed Cannery Row just in honor to John Steinbeck. And boy, they had a little Steinbeck exhibit in the what's that? Gosh, I can't think of the name. It's aquarium. There, beautiful. Okay. Sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
No, that's okay.
I'm just kind of had to be. Now, East of Eden, that was published in 1952. It's more or less a fictional family saga. The main character is Adam Trask, and the plot revolves around Adam Trask and his very unhappy wife, Kathy. And they have twins, and they move to Salinas, California. She leaves them and eventually becomes an atom in a brothel. The twins grow up and they're very like an allegory for Cain and Abel. Next slide, please. God, I'm almost done. East of Eden themes: depravity, love, compassion, gaining acceptance and greatness, to capacity for self-destruction. Boy, I've seen a lot of that in my days. And the power of guilt and freedom. There are many connections to the story of Cain and Abel. Next slide. East of Eden was famously filmed in 1955. It starred James Dean, one of his 3 movies. This movie only dealt with the final portion of the book. And also, there was a mini-series that was filmed in 1981 that starred a lot of people. Okay, getting near the end. Steinbeck considered East of Eden his masterpiece. That was his favorite book. He just loved that book. He said, the most longest and surely the most difficult work I have ever done. I've put all the things I have wanted to write all my life. This is the book. Next. Now, John Steinbeck was a very heavy smoker. He died in 1968 at only age 66. His ashes are interred in Salinas, California. And the grand climax, the National Steinbeck Center, it's located on 1 Main Street, Salinas, California, of all places. It was opened in 1998 and houses the largest collection of his archives in the States. And I thank you for your attention. I don't have to go through the other stuff, do I?
Tell them what your writing prompt is going to
Okay, well, if it's chosen, the writing exercise will be, which book would you like to read of the ones I covered just now of his California series? Would you like to read and why? That's all. And I'm out of here.
Okay, so again, let me give you a little bit of information on how this morning is going. We're honoring 5 authors from California who were known worldwide, who made a huge difference in literature and in our understanding of ourselves and the world. We've seen Raymond Chandler, John Steinbeck. I'm going to do one now, but you'll notice at the end of every presentation, there's a writing prompt. At the end of all 5 presentations, we're going to give you time to pick one of the writing prompts. We don't expect you to do all 5. So you will pick which one you want to do. We'll have them all up here on the screen to remind you what they were. We'll have all 5 of Steinbeck's books up here so you're reminded of them. And then you're going to choose something you want to write about. We'll give you a few minutes to put something together. And then if you want to share out, we'll share those out. So that's the plan. I am here to present on my favorite author. And see, it's working. My favorite author brought all these movies to the screen. These are all based on his books. And my favorite author is Michael Crichton. People know, a lot of people know like one or two of his stories, but have no idea how prolific and amazing Michael Crichton really was. And I'm going to get my notes just so that I don't forget anything. He was tall. He was 6'9". He was an absolute workaholic. He would push himself while writing a book, getting up earlier and earlier and earlier until he was only getting 4 hours of sleep a night. He was married 5 times. And we probably know why. First 4 marriages ended in divorce. His last wife, Sherry, was very outspoken. I saw Michael Crichton, they were doing an interview with him. Good Morning America, I think it was, went to his home and they were talking to him and his wife and everything. And the whole thing started with them going to their home, and his wife, Sherry, greeted the reporters, and they came in and they're filming and everything. And she turns to the reporters, she says, "By the way, has he told you how smart he is yet?" The greatest thing. Now that's a wife that says, "He told you how smart he is yet?" She had some spunk, and I like that. Just knew how to keep him in line. So the books. The guy would knock out a book in a matter of weeks. Once he had done all the research, once he had the background, and his books are so well researched, they're absolutely amazing. It's like getting an education when you read one of his books. Many of us have seen the movies, have never read one of his actual books. If you read the book, like I said, it's amazing. So I'm going to show you my books. These are my Michael Crichton books. And there are 2 of them holding the projector up, so it projects up high. Terminal Man, 5 Patients, here, Lost World, Jurassic Park, Gate of Fear, Timeline, next, Rising Sun, The Great Train Robbery, Prey, Congo, Eaters of the Dead, The Andromeda Strain, Disclosure, and Airframe. These are just my Michael Crichton books that I've read. They're so much fun to read. They are techno thrillers. And what Michael Crichton was known for was that he would write books that had to do with science, with what was going on in science. So Michael Crichton he was a graduate from Harvard University, graduated summa cum laude, again, a workaholic, went to work at Massachusetts General, actually became a physician. He was a doctor, but he was writing novels on the side to pay his way through college. And just could not get away from writing. So one of his books, the one I mentioned, 5 Patients, he actually talks about the hospital and what hospitals are like, how they're funded, how they're organized, what the history of the hospitals are, the whole history of medicine. But then he goes into 5 particular patients who had highly unusual cases. And again, he just could not stop writing. It became a passion for him, and we know what that's like. So his career highlights, he is the only person who has had a #1 movie, #1 TV show, and #1 book all at the same time. and he did it twice. So, his book Disclosure, Jurassic Park, the movie, and ER, the television show, were all number ones. And that was 1994, 95, 96. It was Airframe. Twister was the movie, the number one movie, and ER, again, the number one TV show. So this is a guy that made a difference. He had a huge impact on the entertainment industry. When he started writing, he used pseudonyms and wrote thrillers. The Andromeda Strain was his first major bestseller. And if you've ever seen the movie or read the book, it's absolutely fascinating. What I love about Michael Crichton's writing is he shows how no matter how brilliant we think we are and how much we think we're in control, especially of nature, something will go wrong. Something will go wrong, and it could be something as small as a paper clip. If you read the book, The Andromeda Strain, they're in this situation where there are these microbes from space that have made it to the earth. They're highly contagious. They create this virus that people die from, and it's horrendous. And there's this center set up, and they've discovered how bad this is, and their job is to alert the public, and they can't because a paper clip fell into their printer and kept the printer from printing. And that one paper clip cost so many lives. So he likes to do things like that. He likes to show how frail we really are. He wrote and directed Westwood and Coma. He got, like I said, he wrote constantly, but he also enjoyed doing the films. He was a director, and he wrote the screenplay for Jurassic Park. I remember when Jurassic Park first came out, and I read the book because I was an avid fan by then. I read the book, and I went to all my friends and I said, "This is going to be big. This is going to be big." And at that time, no one had ever heard of it. So let me tell you a real quick story. I was a teacher for 30 years here in Hesperia. And the Hesperia School District used to be on what was called year-round, the year-round system. And we would be on for 2 months and off for 1 month. And oftentimes, teachers like myself, we would sub during the month we were off to earn a little extra money, and they needed the subs. Well, I got a call from the district, and they said, "We need you to take this class. It's a horrible class. It's awful. 6th graders, and they are horrible. But we'd like you to take them for a month. It's at the end of the year. It's their last month. Their teacher died. During the break, their break before their last 2 months, Mr. Juarez was up here. He was an avid runner, and he was running along the aqueduct, had a heart attack, and died. So now these 6th graders have lost their teacher. He was one of the best teachers in the district, which is, anybody who knows anything about teaching, you know that if you're the best teacher, you get the worst kids. It's the way that you're, it's a pat on the back that you get. Anyway, Mr. Juarez had this horrible class. Well, the teacher that had gone before me and taken that first month didn't teach him anything. The whole month was, "I know we're grieving and we're feeling so sad." Okay, I get that. But then I had to come in and I had to finish their school year with academics, and I had to make out their report cards. So I was trying to think, what am I going to do? What do you do with 35 kids that are just out of control? And, I mean, they were a tough class. So I told them one day, I said, "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to write letters to companies asking for free stuff. You can write anything you like, any company that you like their stuff, write to them and they will send you free stuff because they have promotional materials and they want their fans to stay fans. Write them a letter. So the kids would write these letters and I would tell them that they had to edit them. They had to make them really professional. They had to be very high quality to be able to get the attention of these companies. Well, what I did was I included my letter explaining to the companies what these kids had been through. So 2 weeks after that, I walk into the office and the entire office is covered in boxes, the floor. And the secretary says, "Oh, Mr. Apodaca, these are for you." What is this? They were from Universal Studios. One of the kids had written to Universal Studios. And it was all merchandise from Jurassic Park. Stuffed animals, silly straws with dinosaurs on them. It was, so much stuff, pups and all kinds of things. So I took them to my room and I distributed them with the kids and we took a picture with all the kids holding their stuff and we sent it back to Universal Studios with a thank you letter. Anyway, that's one of my interactions with this story and how powerful it was. So the way that Michael Crichton would write, I'm sorry to get myself back together here. The way Michael Crichton writes his books, and this is why I think I like his books so much, he will look at history and he will track the history of a particular scientific field. And in this book, The Terminal Man, he did 13 steps. Well, the first 12 steps are actual things that have happened. And The Terminal Man is all about a guy who gets a electrode put into his brain that helps him not have epileptic seizures. This was brand new technology. And, he goes all the way back to 1864 and the different aspects, different things that have been done for epilepsy. And I didn't put the whole list here, but he explains all these different seminal events and then talks about how a chimpanzee was experimented with. And then in 1971, that's where his book starts. And what he does, which is so brilliant, is he shows you kind of the road that we're on, and then shows you what's next in the road. And it's always terrifying. It's always horrific what's next in the road. He shows how we build toward disaster. And he's he's very much an award-winning author, very well celebrated, and again, very, very well known. California author. And he died from cancer, November the 4th, 2008, 66 years of age, so young. So my writing assignment for you is to come up with your own techno thriller. So I want you to think about what's going on with science now. You can take energy, robotics, computing, AI, genetic engineering, photonics, which is lasers, or anything else you know something about in science. Think about how these technologies could go wrong and become a threat to the survival of your main characters and the world. And if you want a bonus, think of something simple and small that can throw the whole thing into chaos. And that's why I have the paper clip here for Andromeda Strain. And this is the character Nedry in Jurassic Park. This is what he looks like as a Lego. He was the chaotic factor in Jurassic Park. If you've ever read Jurassic Park, the book, they allude a little bit to it in the movie about chaos theory. Well, the entire book is really a study of chaos theory. And it shows how a small, seemingly insignificant factor can destroy a whole involved system. And that's where you have Nedry, who's this random guy who is very selfish, very self-seeking, and he's going to sell the dinosaurs. And he's also the guy that has access to the whole computer system and shuts everything down, and the whole island collapses. You have this long collapse and everything falls apart because of this one guy. And again, you just can't account for all the factors and everything that can go wrong. So at this point, we are going to take our break. So we've looked at 3 California authors. We have 2 more to go, and then a time for writing exercise. Then we'll be all finished this morning. So again, I'm just so impressed to be a part of a club that actually produces. You know, that's what we want to do. We want to train ourselves, learn how to become writers, improve the craft, and improve our tools and our skills. And then we want to publish. We want to get our stuff out there. And we have so many authors who are publishing right now. It's very, very exciting.
We have 4 new books in the library today.
4 new books in the library. Excellent. If you have a library book and have not returned it, please talk to Janice about it and let her know what's going on. Okay, we have another speaker coming up, and Carrie is one of our newer members, but you would never know it. She is a go-getter. She's a part of several of our committees, and she's just amazing and wonderful to listen to. So with no further ado.
Thank you so much.
USB.
Roses are red, violets are blue. I don't understand poetry. How about you? You know, poetry's never been my thing. Anita, no offense, wherever you are, you're here somewhere. Sorry. And I did understand your poem, but for the most part, I don't understand poetry. Poetry, I look at it, and even when they tell me what it means, I just don't get it. I don't get the different types: haiku, sonnet, limerick, and then how to write it. Meter, rhythm, what else? See, I wrote them down. Structure, form. My eyes just kind of glaze over. Poetry is not for me, except for 2 poems written by the same author, Robert Frost. I was introduced to one as a child and one as an adult. And they're the only poems that I could ever visualize, that I could understand, that meant something to me. And it was the ending. Each one of them, it's the very ending that spoke to me, that made a huge impact. To this day, I remember the last lines of that poem that I was introduced to as a child. And I want to read that poem to you, and then I will also talk about the ending of the other one. I was 8 or 9, and this was the very first piece of my literature book. Never forgotten it. Stopping by woods on a snowy evening. I've grown up, though, thinking the title was Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening. So if I refer to it as that, please forgive me. I've thought about it as that name for over 50 years. So I'm going to read the poem to you. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his little harness bell a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles before I sleep. That ending I have never forgotten. As a child, I could just sense such a sadness in that poem. Such a sadness in the ending, the conflict of wanting to stay there, but having to leave. That poem to me was very visual. I could feel how cold it was. I could see the darkness even, just not seeing it. Hear the little bells of the horse. I always think of the little horse going like this, and the bells going off. And feeling those little snowflakes, the downy flakes. This poem just always spoke to me as a child, and even as an adult. I've never forgotten it, never forgotten those last lines. And that brings me to my second poem, which again, it's the very last line of the poem. I was introduced to this as an adult, and I have used this in many a speech. It's from The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. That speaks to my life in so many ways. I've never taken the path of least resistance. My path has always been that road that's less traveled, that's a little harder. And this poem has always spoken to me about that, made a huge impact on me. The only two poems in my life that I can remember and I love are both by Robert Frost. I'm going to give you a little bit of his bio. Robert Frost was born March 26, 1874. He was born in San Francisco, California, to William Prescott Frost Jr. and his wife, Isabel Moody. In 1885, they moved to Lawrence, Massachusetts after his father died of tuberculosis. And then Robert Frost was co-valedictorian of his high school, Lawrence High School, alongside his future wife, Eleanor White. And that was in 1892. He did attend college briefly, Dartmouth and Harvard, but he did not get a degree from either one because he had to go and support his family. Some of his early careers before he became a literary success was teacher, cobbler, editor, and farmer. And when he was 38, not finding any success in the U.S., he moved to England, going to try something else. And in 1913, he had his first publication, A Boy's Will. It was a collection. And then in 1914, North of Boston, they were both published in London. That established his reputation. He moved back to the U.S. in 1915 during World War I, and he was now a literary celebrity. He settled on a farm in Franconia, New Hampshire. He went on to win 4 Pulitzer Prizes. And besides the 2 poems that I've mentioned, he was also known for Mending Wall and Fire and Ice. And he became the very first poet to recite a poem at a presidential inauguration. It was in 1961 for John F. Kennedy, and he did his poem by heart called The Gift Outright. He did have a lot of personal tragedy, though. He had 6 children, and 4 of them died before him. Eleanor Patina was an infant. Elliot was 4. He died of cholera. Marjorie was 29. She died in childbirth, has childbirth complications. Carol was 38, died of suicide. Of the 2 that were remaining, Leslie and Irma was institutionalized for mental illness. And then In 1938, his wife, who was 64 at the time, passed away. Robert Frost went on to live a long life, 88 years old. He died on January 29, 1963 in Boston due to surgical complications. He is buried in Bennington, Vermont, and I love his epitaph. I had a lover's quarrel with the world. Just says it all. He's a master when it comes to words. Some of his key characteristics. He's known for vividly depicting landscapes, seasons, daily lives of people, which is what spoke a lot to me in the Stopping by a Wood. He also dealt with human emotions, struggles, philosophical questions. In The Road Not Taken, his themes were choice, individuality, path of life. Stopping by Wood, it was duty, temptation, allure of the unknown, and I would also add conflict. There was a lot of conflict in that. I am not an aficionado of poetry, but these two poems, especially the first one, Stopping by a Wood, I have known since I was 8 or 9. I love that poem. I love the ending. And I love this author, even though those are the only 2 poems that I even know that he wrote that speak to me. And so my exercise for you today is you've written a poem. Doesn't matter what it's about. But your challenge now is to write the ending of that poem, no more than 2 sentences. In The Road Not Taken, that was one long sentence. I did check with Jenny. She told me, yes, that was 1 sentence. Because I wasn't sure, because it has a little dash. And Jenny said, nope, 1 sentence. And in Stopping by the Wood, it was the same sentence written twice. So no more than 2 sentences. And the ending should encompass the meaning of the poem. Stopping by the woods on a snowy night. The last line, and miles to go before I sleep. That encompasses what that poem is about. The road not taken, the choice of the roads, that last sentence tells you everything about that poem. So you need to write the ending of your poem that's going to encompass the meaning of that poem and also leave it with that impactful punch. Should you choose to accept it, go on and write that poem. But I know there's someone else to go. Okay. Yep, I'm done. Short and sweet.
Thank you. Thank you. Terry Stein. Our last speaker this morning, again, California speakers, California authors is what we're focusing on. And our last speaker is going to do somebody who is extremely important to the California Writers Club, and that is Jack London. Debbie has chosen to take Jack London, and she is putting together, working with me to put together a presentation that we're hoping will be presented in lots of different venues, different writing clubs, colleges, high schools. We want to promote the writings of Jack London, and especially the book that comes from our club about Jack London. So with no further ado, I'm going to ask Debbie to come on up and do her presentation. Just so you know, you can probably tell there's been a little bit of arm twisting for every one of these speakers. But they're all doing a great job. Remember the one right there. Okay. You're good. First one? Yep.
Okay. How many of you know why this book is connected to our club? Couple? Okay. So for those of you that don't know, this book was not written by Jack London.
See, turn them up a little bit more. Because then we can't see. No, I can't.
Okay. It was not written by Jack London. It was written by his childhood friend. They met when they were about 9 years old. And this is a manuscript that his friend had written about all their adventures together. And they met at the Cole School in Oakland, and they were both around the age of 9. And the events in this book date back to 1886. And the manuscript was originally given to the Oakland Public Library by Jack London's daughter Joan around 1965. And then in and around 2014, Frank Atherton, so he's the childhood friend, his granddaughter Diane Neal acquired the manuscript from the Oakland Library, and members of the High Desert Writers Club helped her get this published. And so that's how this is connected to our club. Okay, next slide, Mike. There we go. Okay, so this is a portion of the books that Jack London actually wrote. They're probably, I don't know what that is.
That's my dog.
That was a character that creeped out of the book. Okay, so these are some of his most popular ones. Up there you have The Sea Wolf, and you have White Fang and Call of the Wild. A lot of his books were based on his adventures that he did when he was a young boy. And they're fictional stories, but they're from his adventures and things that he did. He was quite a explorer at a very young age. Okay, next one, Mike. Okay, so this book right here, it gives us the best window into the early life of Jack London. So it's not a biography, written by him or autobiography. It's from a friend's perspective, and just all the different adventures they went on, which were many, and it's a very, very interesting book, what these two young boys did. Okay, next. Okay, it almost didn't happen. He almost didn't become a writer. When he was, I'm not sure how old he was, but when he was younger, there was a newspaper called the San Francisco Call, and they held a contest for short stories. And so Jack London was poor. He didn't have a typewriter. He didn't have, a lot of ways to do things, that we would do today. So he wrote a story, but he wrote it in his own handwriting. And he sent it to the paper to the publisher to look at. And of course, it was very illegible. They couldn't really read it. And the guy kind of took it and just crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. Then a little while went by and he's like, that kind of had an interesting title to it. And the title was called A Typhoon Off the Coast of Japan, which had to do with something that Jack had dealt with. And so the guy digs it out of the trash, takes all the wrinkles out of it, and figures out how to read it, and eventually gives Jack a first prize, which back then was a whole $25. All right, next one. Okay, so in the book, it tells you a lot about his childhood, a lot of things that happened, how he spent his free time. He was always busy. Things that he did for fun, what his passions were, what it was like to go to school. There were kids that picked on him because he liked to read. He'd be out at recess reading, and the kids would go, "What's the matter? You're too good to play with us? You just all you want to sit here and read your book?" And so it talks about that, and then what families were like back then. Him and Frank both worked, and the money that they earned went to their families. It didn't go in their pockets, and they were getting like 10 cents an hour. So it was, times were different back then. Okay, next. It also tells you what Jack London's relationship with literature was like when he was a little boy. He owned a few books, but most of the books he got from the library. And he would check out 2 thick books every week and read those. And the way he would read them is he would spend every second that he had free reading. He'd be riding the train and he'd be reading. His dad spent a lot of time in this bar, and he'd go in the bar and he'd bring his book and he'd be reading. And at recess, he'd be reading. He just was constantly reading. And he was always in a hurry because he had a paper route. And so he had all these places he had to get to and get time for his reading. Okay, next. Okay. Let me grab my water. I'm getting a little dry here. When I talk too much and then I get a dry cough. And Frank had a philosophy. He said a person can never learn everything there is to be learned, but that's no reason he should be a moron all his life. Bread and meat are food for the body, and books are food for the mind. As my stomach gets hungry for bread and meat, so does my brain get hungry for reading. There was one time when Jack and Frank went into this library, and Frank was looking at all the rows of books, and he's trying to count how many books are in there. And he's calculating in his head and all this. And Jack says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Well, I'm trying to figure out how old you will be when you finish reading all these books." And Jack looked at him and said, "I can never read all these books. There's new books being written every day. How could I possibly read all these?" And then Frank asked him, "Well, why bother then?" And then that's why he came up with this saying. He says, just because you can't read all of them doesn't mean you shouldn't read some of them. Okay.
Yeah, this is a new one.
Okay. All right. And this will tell you the key events throughout his life that caused him to become a writer, what his aspirations were, and how did these shape his adult life. And then the influence his father had. His father was a policeman that walked the beat in one of the most dangerous places. And so a lot of what his father did molded him into who he was. And then him and Frank as boys, they're like 11 and 12 years old. They would go out in this mountain range, just up the mountain, down the mountain, and they're looking for a cave because they think in the cave there's a wildcat. And so they didn't have any money, but somehow they got a hold of some lead. So they would sit in the afternoon and they would make little bullets out of lead, and they'd take their slingshot and they would go up in the mountain looking for wildcats, and they would plan on killing it with the slingshot. And then they wanted to sell the pelts and different things to the Chinamen to get money, because they were always trying to make money. They had all these dreams and aspirations of all these great things they were going to do, but they needed money. And then one thing, they came home, it was like 11 o'clock at night. These 2 young boys, they're coming out of the mountain. There's no flashlight. There's not a full moon. And the mother's like, it's like 11 o'clock at night. The mother's like, I was getting a little bit worried about you guys. I'm glad you made it home. Can you imagine sending an 11 or 12-year-old today to climb a mountain by themselves? And they would go to the pawn shop and they would sell them guns. And they would think nothing about riding a bicycle 50 miles in one day to get to the next town. They'd get a flat tire and they just, have to deal with it. Okay, next. All right. Although he had written several books, Call of the Wild seems to be the most popular one that they've made movies out of. The first one up there was, that one came out in 1935, and that one starred Clark Gable. And then the middle one was in 1972, and that one was Charlton Heston. And in 2020, they came out with another version with Harrison Ford. So it's all basically the same story, but you know how they keep doing remakes, but it was popular enough that they kept doing it. All right, well, as far as Jack London's character, he had a lot of confidence in himself. He wouldn't take any, he didn't start a fight, but he wouldn't back down from a fight. And if anybody, you know, bothered, like one time a kid took his book away from him and threw it in the mud. Well, that caused a fight. And then when the principal asked him how he wanted his punishment, the other kid says, "Oh, I'll be good. I won't do it ever again. Please don't punish it." And Jack says, "No, I'll take my punishment." And because Jack stood up and said he'd take his punishment, the other kid had to stand up and take his punishment. So there's a lot of stories like that, and there are things that happen. I already told you he read 2 thick books a week. He had a favorite saying, and it was "ye gods and little fishes," was what he would say all the time. He was interested in the sea, into navigating the sea and boating, and at one point he wanted to become a pirate. And there's just all kinds of things that they did back then that kids would never be allowed to do today. And then I already told you about how he took his money and helped out his parents with their bills. And then as a writer, he received many rejection letters, but he didn't stop. He just kept going. And I'm sure a lot of us have had rejection letters, but you don't quit. You just keep going. Okay. I just told you about the first fight at school. That was with the kid that took his book away from him. There was a group, they were called the Fish Gang, because where he lived, it was along the wharf, along the ocean. And so there was this gang of thieves between the age of 15 and 30, and they would terrorize all the people that lived there and the merchants and steal from them. And then they were always wanting to pick on the poor Chinaman that was trying to make a living and pick their peaches, and they get chased and just all kinds of things. And of course, he was in the Typhoon, which helped him make the story that finally eventually got where he won the prize. He was a socialist. He prospected in Alaska. And then there was a time when he got very depressed and he actually contemplated suicide. But obviously he didn't. Okay. All right. Well, this is up in Oakland, California, because that's the area he was from. And they actually have a thing there called Jack London Square. And they've kind of adopted him as their native son, so to speak. And they have this whole area that's attributed to him. All right. Whoop, back up 1 minute.
Gotcha.
There we go. Okay, so in the middle here, you see the arch. That's like the entrance into Jack London Square, and it says Jack London up there. And then the curves have his name written on there. And then the compass, that represents his desire to travel and see the world. That's what that symbol is for. All right, and then they also have this life-size statue of him, and this plaque underneath it. And quote on the plaque says, "I would rather be ashes than dust. I would rather that my spark should burn out in a brilliant blaze than it should be stifled by dry rot. I would rather be a superb meteor, every atom of me in magnificent glow, than a sleepy and permanent planet. The proper function of man is to live, not to just exist." All right. Now this is an actual saloon. Many chapters in here talks about how Jack's dad would go to the saloon after work, come home late at night. And back then, they would let the kids go in there. That's where Jack would bring his book and just sit in the corner and read his book while dad's having a drink with the guys. And so it was, this is the actual one from 1884 that's still standing. And it was built with timbers from an old whaling ship. And the original owner was a man named Johnny Heinhold. And Jack's father, throughout the year, he ran a tap. And so throughout the years, he kind of didn't pay it all off. But when Jack became famous, he went back and he made sure that he paid all his dad's debt. And I also researched, and it says that the floor is slanted in there because of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. So that's all original. This is a replica, kind of the same cabin. He had a cabin like that he stayed in Alaska during the Yukon gold rush. This is part of it. They took it apart and they moved it, but they didn't get all of it. Some of the wood was taken to Dawson City, Canada. So some of it's original wood, some of it's added wood, but this is what it looked like. So it's considered to be an actual replica of the original one. And this is kind of what it looked like inside the cabin. Not a lot of, nothing fancy. Would have been cold in there. Looks like a dirt floor maybe. So not the best living conditions, but better than being out in the snow. Right. And then they have these I guess they're bronze or something statues. That's to represent the animals that were in his books, like Call of the Wild and White Fang. And then they have these little paw prints, and those indicate special places, or like there's some of them around town. So like if there's a walking tour, and you just follow the little paw prints, and it'll take you to the different places around town where they represented Jack. And then this just shows the area, the wharf, where he grew up. And him and Frank were always trying to catch ducks, and they were going to kill them and sell the pelts and things to the Chinamen. But they had a hard time getting the ducks, so they ended up getting mud hens. They never got rich. They never made the money that they were hoping for. All right, now this is a quote out of the book, The Call of the Wild. It says, it was beautiful spring weather, but neither dogs nor humans were aware of it. Each day, the sun rose earlier and set later. It was dawn by 3 in the morning, and twilight lingered till 9 at night. The whole long day was a blaze of sunshine. The ghostly winter silence had given way to the great spring murmur of awakening life. The murmur arose from all the land, fraught with the joy of living. It came from the things that moved and lived, things which had been dead and which had not moved during the long months of frost. The sap rising in the pines. The willows and aspens were bursting out in young buds. Shrubs and vines were putting on fresh garbs of green, and crickets sang in the night, and all manner of creeping, crawling things rustled forth into the sun. So the writing assignment for me is for you to remember an exotic place far away from here, and write in a description, a paragraph describing that place, the environment, the sounds, the smells, the animals, or whatever. And that concludes mine. And then I do have bookmarks for anybody that wants them. They go along with the book, and they would tell you how to acquire the book if you're interested in that.
Okay, so here are our 5 writing prompts, and we are running out of time. So here's what I'd like you to do. Write down the writing prompt that you want to start on, and we'll give you a few minutes to start on it here. But then take it home, polish it, and email it to me And we'll do a couple of pages in the Inkslinger next month. And we'll publish these pieces of writing. So take a look. When we did Raymond Chandler, it was write 3 sentences using similes in the noir style. For instance, she has hair like a brush fire at night. John Steinbeck, we talked about which book would you like to read and why. Michael Crichton outlined a techno thriller based on science. Robert Frost, end the poem. Write the ending of the poem, the last 1 or 2 lines. And Jack London, write a description of an exotic place. Now, I want to do one more thing. We did this for a reason today. We took a look and we looked at some highly successful, very well-known California writers. But the only reason we did that was hopefully to inspire you to be the next one. History continues, great writers keep coming, and I know you guys, I know that there are many incredible writers in this room. Please take this as a challenge and become the next California writer that's internationally known, who writes those stories that people just keep talking about and keep reading over and over again. They keep making new movies about that same story. Keep pushing on. These people, I hope if you got anything out of this morning, you saw that every one of these writers was flesh and blood, just like us. There's no reason why we can't be where they ended up. We just have to keep working at it. So thank you this morning. Take a few minutes and write, and then we're going to have to clear out because the church has another engagement here. All right, thank you so much.